The mop made a soft squeaking sound against the marble floor. Back and forth, back and forth. This was the sound of David's life now. Every evening after the musicians packed up their instruments and went home to their fancy apartments, he would come in with his cleaning cart and make everything spotless again. David was 42 years old, but sometimes he felt much older. His hands were rough from years of scrubbing and mopping. His back ached by the end of each shift, but he never complained. This job at the Riverside Concert Hall paid his bills and put food on the table for his daughter. That was enough. Or at least that's what he told himself every single day. The concert hall was beautiful. Massive chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls of crystal. The walls were covered in dark wood that seemed to glow under the warm lights, and right in the center of the main stage sat a grand piano. A Steinway, black and shiny like a sleeping giant. David cleaned around it every night, running his cloth gently over its surface, careful not to leave even a single fingerprint. Nobody knew that David used to play piano. Nobody asked janitors about their past lives. To everyone here, he was just the quiet guy who emptied the trash bins and made sure the bathrooms were stocked with paper towels. The musicians walked past him without really seeing him. The director barely nodded when they crossed paths in the hallway. David had become invisible, and sometimes that was easier than explaining who he used to be. Back in Beijing 20 years ago, David had been someone different. He had been a student at the music conservatory, one of the promising ones. His teachers said he had something special in his playing, something that couldn't be taught. He would practice 8 hours a day, his fingers dancing across the keys until they ached. He dreamed of concert halls and audiences. He dreamed of making music that would move people to tears. But life doesn't always care about dreams. His father got sick. Really sick. The kind of sick that emptied bank accounts and crushed futures. David had to leave school. He had to find work. He became a piano teacher for children, giving basic lessons to kids who mostly didn't want to be there. The money helped his family survive, but every day a piece of his dream died a little more. Then he met Linda. She was a nurse at the hospital where his father received treatment. She had kind eyes and a smile that made the hard days bearable. They fell in love, got married, and eventually had a daughter they named Amy. When his father finally passed away, David felt both grief and a strange sense of freedom. Maybe now he could return to music. Maybe now he could dream again. But Linda wanted more for their future. She wanted Amy to grow up with opportunities they never had, so they made the biggest decision of their lives. They left China and came to America. David was 34 years old, starting over in a country where his music degree meant nothing and his English was broken. The first few years were brutal. David worked in restaurant kitchens and warehouses anywhere that would hire him. Linda worked double shifts at a nursing home. They lived in a tiny apartment where the heat barely worked in winter. But Amy was in a good school, and that made it all worthwhile. That's what parents do. They sacrifice their dreams so their children can have better ones. Eventually, David found the job at Riverside Concert Hall. It was night shift work, which meant he could pick Amy up from school in the afternoons. The pay wasn't great, but it was steady. And there was something bittersweet about being around music again, even if he was just the person cleaning up after it, every night. After the orchestra finished rehearsal, David would push his cart through the empty halls. He would pause outside the practice rooms and listen. He memorized the pieces they played just by hearing them over and over. Beethoven, Mozart, Chopin, Rachmaninoff. The music lived in his head like old friends he wasn't allowed to visit. Sometimes, when he was absolutely sure everyone had left, David would stand near the grand piano. He wouldn't sit down. He wouldn't play. That would be crossing a line. But he would place his hands above the keys, fingers positioned just right, and move them silently through the pieces he remembered. His muscles still knew the patterns. His hands still knew the way home. 3 years passed like this. 3 years of mopping floors and living with ghosts of what might have been. Amy was doing well in school. She wanted to be a doctor. Linda had been promoted to supervisor at the nursing home. Their lives were stable, secure, ordinary. David told himself he was content. A man could live without his dreams if his family was happy, right? On this particular Thursday evening, something was different. David could feel the tension in the air as soon as he arrived for his shift. The orchestra members were rushing around, stressed and snapping at each other. Tomorrow night was the big annual gala, the event where wealthy donors came to watch performances and write big checks to keep the concert hall running. The director, Mr. Harrison, was a tall man with gray hair and an expensive suit. David had cleaned his office many times, but they had maybe exchanged 10 words in 3 years. Tonight, Mr. Harrison's voice echoed through the hallways, and he did not sound happy. David was emptying a trash can near the main hall when he heard shouting. Through the partially open door, he could see Mr. Harrison standing over a young pianist. The kid couldn't have been more than 25, and his hands were shaking. "This is unacceptable. Absolutely unacceptable." Mr. Harrison's face was red. "Tomorrow night we have critics coming. We have donors coming. And you're butchering Rachmaninoff like it's a nursery rhyme." "I'm sorry, I just need more time to practice," the young pianist stammered. "We don't have more time. The gala is tomorrow night." Mr. Harrison paced back and forth like a caged animal. "If you can't pull this together, we'll have to cut the piece entirely. Do you understand what that means? Do you understand how that makes us look?" The young pianist looked like he might cry. David felt sorry for him. He remembered that pressure, that fear of disappointing people, of not being good enough. Mr. Harrison stormed out of the hall, his footsteps heavy with anger. The young pianist gathered his sheet music with shaking hands and followed, leaving the hall empty and silent. David stood there for a moment, then pushed his cart into the main hall to begin cleaning. The piano sat there on the stage, patient and waiting. The sheet music was still scattered across its top. David walked closer, telling himself he was just going to tidy up the papers. But then he saw what piece it was. Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, one of the most beautiful, most challenging pieces ever written. David knew this piece. He had learned it years ago, back when he was a different person in a different life. His hands reached out almost on their own and touched the keys. Just one note. Then another. And before he could stop himself, before his careful, cautious mind could interfere, David sat down on the bench and began to play. The first notes came out shaky. David's fingers felt stiff, awkward. 20 years was a long time. But then something happened. Something clicked inside him, like a door opening to a room he had locked away for too long. His fingers remembered. They remembered the weight of each key, the exact pressure needed for each note. The music started flowing through him, not from his mind, but from somewhere deeper, from that place where dreams go to hide when life gets too hard. The opening of Rachmaninoff's concerto is gentle, almost questioning. It's like someone whispering a secret in the dark. David played it softly, carefully, letting each note breathe. His eyes closed. He wasn't in the concert hall anymore. He was 22 again in a practice room in Beijing, playing for his teacher who believed in him. Then the music grew. It swelled and rose like a wave building in the ocean. David's whole body moved with it. His shoulders, his back, even his breathing matched the rhythm. The rough calluses on his fingers from years of cleaning didn't matter anymore. Right now, in this moment, he wasn't a janitor. He was a pianist. He was himself. He didn't hear the door open. He didn't hear the footsteps coming down the aisle. He was lost in the music, in the conversation between his fingers and the keys. The melody climbed higher and higher, notes cascading like water over rocks, building to something beautiful and impossible. Then he heard it, a laugh, sharp and sudden, cutting through the music like a knife. David's hands froze. His eyes snapped open. His heart stopped. Mr. Harrison stood in the middle of the aisle, his expensive briefcase in one hand, his other hand on his hip. He was staring at David with an expression of complete disbelief. And he was laughing. "You?" Mr. Harrison said, his voice dripping with amusement. "You're playing this piano?" David shot up from the bench so fast he almost knocked it over. His face burned with shame. His hands automatically went to his sides, back to the position of a worker, a servant, someone who shouldn't be touching things that don't belong to him. I'm so sorry, Mr. Harrison, I was cleaning and the music was here and David's English, usually decent, fell apart under pressure. The words tangled in his mouth. Mr. Harrison shook his head, still wearing that amused smile. "This is priceless. My janitor thinks he's a concert pianist." David wanted to disappear. He wanted the floor to open up and swallow him whole. This was it. He was going to lose his job. How would he tell Linda? How would they pay rent? What about Amy's school supplies next month? "Please, sir, I apologize. I shouldn't have touched. I was just..." David reached for his cleaning cart, ready to run to escape this nightmare. "Wait," Mr. Harrison said, holding up his hand. But he wasn't looking at David anymore. He was looking at the piano, at the sheet music, at the bench. His smile had faded. How far did you get? In the piece, sir? How much of it did you play? Before I interrupted? David swallowed hard. Maybe 2 minutes? The opening section. Mr. Harrison walked slowly toward the stage. His footsteps echoed in the empty hall. He set his briefcase down in one of the seats. Then he turned to David, and his expression had changed completely. The mockery was gone. Now there was something else in his eyes. Curiosity, maybe even respect. Play it again, Mr. Harrison said. Mr. Harrison, I should go. I have work to finish and… That wasn't a request. The director's voice was firm but not angry. Sit down and play it again. From the beginning, David's legs felt like water. This had to be some kind of test. Some way to humiliate him further before firing him. But what choice did he have? He sat back down on the bench, his hands trembling now, all the confidence from before completely gone. He placed his fingers on the keys. They felt cold now, foreign. He started to play, but it came out mechanical, scared. All the beauty from before had evaporated. Stop, Mr. Harrison said after just a few measures. He walked up onto the stage, his shoes clicking against the wood. He came close to the piano, close to David. You're playing like a frightened child. Whatever you were doing before when you thought no one was listening, do that again. David looked up at him, confused. I heard you from the hallway, Mr. Harrison continued. I was coming back for my briefcase and I heard someone playing. But it wasn't playing. It was something else. It was real music. He pulled over a nearby chair and sat down right there on the stage, just a few feet from David. So play it again, and this time forget I'm here. How could David forget? How could anyone forget their boss was watching them, judging them? But he closed his eyes. He took a deep breath. He thought about Amy, about the dreams he used to have, about all the nights he had stood near this piano wanting to touch it. And he played. This time it came back. The music flowed again. He forgot about the cleaning cart waiting in the aisle. He forgot about his uniform with the concert hall logo on it. He forgot about being invisible. The music pulled him down into its depths and he let it. His fingers danced across the keys. The gentle opening gave way to the powerful middle section, where the piano sings with the full force of the orchestra behind it. Except there was no orchestra tonight. Just David in the Steinway and the silence of the empty hall. But somehow he could hear the orchestra in his head. He played both parts, the solo and the accompaniment, making the piano sound like it was having a conversation with invisible instruments. The music built to a crescendo. David's hands moved faster, stronger. Sweat formed on his forehead. His breath came quick. This was the part where the pianist had to be both powerful and precise, where one wrong note would crash the whole thing down. But David's hands knew the way. They had known it for 20 years, just waiting for permission to remember. Then he reached the end of the section, the part where the orchestra would take over in a full performance. His hands lifted from the keys. The last note hung in the air, vibrating, slowly fading into silence. David opened his eyes. He had forgotten Mr. Harrison was there, but now he looked over and saw the director staring at him with his mouth actually open. His jaw had literally dropped. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence in the hall was so complete that David could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. Finally, Mr. Harrison stood up. He walked in a small circle, running his hand through his gray hair. He looked like a man who had just seen something impossible, like gravity working backwards or water flowing uphill. Who are you? Mr. Harrison finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. Who are you, really? David didn't know how to answer that question. Was he the janitor who mopped these floors every night? Was he the father who packed his daughter's lunch every morning? Was he the music student from Beijing who had given up his dreams? Was he all of these things or none of them? I'm David Chen, I work here. I clean. No, Mr. Harrison said firmly, shaking his head. No, you don't just clean. What I just heard, that was professional level. That was better than professional. He struggled to find the word. That was art. David felt tears threatening to come. He blinked them back. He hadn't cried in years. Men like him, men who had lost everything and rebuilt from nothing, they didn't have the luxury of tears. Mr. Harrison sat back down, but this time he leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, looking at David like he was a puzzle that needed solving. Tell me your story, he said. And don't leave anything out. So David told him. Right there on the stage, with the grand piano between them, David opened up the locked rooms of his past and let everything spill out. David's voice shook as he started talking. He hadn't told this story to anyone in years. Not even Linda knew all of it. Some pain you just learn to carry quietly, like a stone in your pocket that you forget about until someone asks what's weighing you down. He told Mr. Harrison about the Beijing Conservatory, about being 17 years old and getting accepted, how his mother cried happy tears because her son was going to be an artist, about the practice rooms where he would spend entire days, stopping only when the security guards kicked him out at midnight, about his teacher, Professor Wang, who saw something special in the way David played. He used to tell me that some people play with their fingers, but I played with my soul, David said, looking down at his rough hands. I thought he was just being nice, but he was serious. He said I could have a real career if I worked hard enough. Mr. Harrison listened without interrupting, his arms crossed, his face unreadable. David told him about his father's illness, cancer, the aggressive kind that eats through a body like fire through paper, how the medical bills piled up faster than they could pay them, how he had to choose between his dream and his family, and how that wasn't really a choice at all. I left school in my 3rd year, David continued, started teaching piano to kids. Basic stuff, you know. Mary had a little lamb. Twinkle, twinkle, little star. These children, they didn't want to be there. Their parents forced them. And here I was, dying inside, teaching them scales when I could have been playing concert halls. He told Mr. Harrison about meeting Linda at the hospital, about falling in love with a woman who saw him as he was, not as he used to be, about their daughter Amy being born, and how holding her for the first time made him feel like maybe life had a different purpose for him than the one he had planned. After my father died, I thought maybe I could go back to music, David said, but Linda had this dream of coming to America. She said Amy could have a better future here. Better schools, more opportunities. How could I say no to that? Mr. Harrison finally spoke. So you gave up music entirely? What choice did I have? David's voice came out sharper than he intended. You think I could walk into Juilliard and say, "Hi, I'm a 34-year-old immigrant with no money and broken English, please let me study"? My degree from Beijing meant nothing here. Nobody cared that I used to be good. I needed to work. I needed to feed my family. The words hung in the air between them. David felt exposed, like he had peeled back his skin and shown Mr. Harrison all the ugly scars underneath. So you've been working here for 3 years, Mr. Harrison said slowly. Cleaning the floors and never once touched a piano? Not until tonight. But you've been listening. Learning the pieces, David nodded. Every night. I hear the orchestra rehearse. I memorize the music. Sometimes when everyone's gone, I stand by the piano and move my fingers in the air, pretending. I know it sounds crazy. It doesn't sound crazy, Mr. Harrison said quietly. It sounds like torture. They sat in silence for a moment. Somewhere in the building, a pipe creaked. A heating vent hummed to life. Normal sounds of a normal night, except nothing about this night was normal anymore. Mr. Harrison stood up and started pacing. He did this thing where he rubbed his chin when he was thinking hard. David had seen him do it before, usually when he was dealing with budget problems or difficult performers. Tomorrow night is the gala, Mr. Harrison finally said. Yes, sir. You heard me earlier with Daniel, the young pianist, I heard. He's not ready. He's a decent player, but he doesn't have it. That thing that makes people stop breathing when they listen. That thing you have. Mr. Harrison stopped pacing and looked directly at David. I need someone who can play that Rachmaninoff concerto and do it justice. David's stomach dropped. He knew where this was going and it terrified him. Mr. Harrison, I can't. Why not? Because I'm. David gestured at his uniform at himself. Look at me. I'm a janitor. I haven't performed in 20 years. I haven't played with an orchestra since I was a student. I would fail. I would embarrass you and embarrass myself. You wouldn't fail. Mr. Harrison's voice was firm. I've been in this business for 30 years. I've heard thousands of pianists. What you just played, that was the real thing. That was what we're looking for and can never find. But the donors, the critics, they'll ask who I am. What will you tell them? That you found your star performer mopping the bathroom? Yes, Mr. Harrison said simply. That's exactly what I'll tell them. David laughed, but it came out bitter. They'll think it's a joke. A publicity stunt. Let them think what they want. But once you start playing, none of that will matter. Mr. Harrison sat down again, leaning forward. Listen to me, David. I'm not offering this because I feel sorry for you. I'm not offering this because we're desperate, although we are. I'm offering this because you can do something that 99% of trained pianists can't do. You can make people feel something real. David's hands were shaking. He clasped them together to make them stop. What about Daniel? The young pianist? Daniel will understand. Or he won't. Either way, he's not ready for this piece. You are. I don't even own a suit. We'll find you a suit. I can't rehearse with the orchestra. They're not here. They will be. I'll call them back tonight. Emergency rehearsal. David felt dizzy. This was happening too fast. Just 10 minutes ago, he was worried about losing his job. Now Mr. Harrison was offering him a chance to play at the biggest event of the year. It was insane. It was impossible. My family, David said. My wife and daughter. They don't know. They think I'm just a cleaner. So tell them. I can't. What if I fail? What if I get up there tomorrow and freeze? What if my hands don't work, or I forget the music, or... David. Mr. Harrison's voice cut through the spiral of panic. Stop. Breathe. Look at me. David looked up. You won't fail, Mr. Harrison said. You know why? Because you've already done the hard part. You've kept your gift alive in secret for 20 years. You've practiced in your head every single night. You've carried this dream through jobs and countries and losses that would have killed most people's spirits. Playing tomorrow night? That's the easy part. That's just showing the world who you've always been. The words hit David somewhere deep. He felt that door inside him, the one he had carefully locked, swing wide open. All the dreams he had buried, all the music he had silenced, all the versions of himself he had put away, they all came flooding back at once. I'm scared, David whispered. Good, Mr. Harrison said. That means it matters. That means it's real. He stood up and extended his hand. So what do you say, David Chen? Will you play tomorrow night? David looked at the hand, then at the piano, then at his own rough, calloused fingers. He thought about Amy sitting in the audience, seeing her father do something she never knew he could do. He thought about Linda, who had sacrificed so much for their family's future. He thought about his younger self in Beijing, that boy who believed music could change the world. He stood up. His legs felt weak, but he stood anyway, and he shook Mr. Harrison's hand. Okay, David said. Okay, I'll do it. Mr. Harrison smiled, really smiled for the first time that night. Good. Now we have a lot of work to do. I need to make some phone calls. The orchestra needs to be here in 2 hours for an all-night rehearsal. Can you stay? David thought about his shift, about the floors that needed mopping, about the schedule he was supposed to follow. Then he thought about what he had just agreed to. Yes, he said, I can stay. The orchestra members started arriving around midnight. They came in looking confused and annoyed, carrying their instrument cases and coffee cups. Nobody likes getting called back to work in the middle of the night. David watched them file in from backstage, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might break through his ribs. Who's the emergency soloist? He heard someone ask. No idea. Harrison just said we had to be here. Said it was urgent. David peeked through the curtain and saw about 30 musicians settling into their seats. The conductor, a stern woman named Mrs. Peterson, stood at her podium looking less than thrilled. She had been conducting for 40 years and had probably seen every kind of drama the music world could throw at her. But this was something new. Mr. Harrison walked onto the stage to address everyone. Thank you all for coming on such short notice. I know this is unusual, but we have a situation. Daniel won't be performing the Rachmaninoff tomorrow night. We have a replacement. Murmurs rippled through the orchestra. David saw the violinists exchanging glances. The cellist in the back row actually laughed. Who's replacing him? Mrs. Peterson asked, her voice sharp. At this hour? For tomorrow night? His name is David Chen. Some of you might have seen him around. He works here. The confusion on their faces deepened. Then one of the viola players, a young woman with glasses, suddenly said, Wait, the janitor? You're joking. I'm not joking, Mr. Harrison said calmly. I heard him play tonight. He's the real deal. But he needs to rehearse with you. And we only have tonight to make it work. The murmurs turned into actual protests. The first chair violinist, a man in his 50s, stood up. Robert, with all due respect, this is insane. We have critics coming tomorrow. Donors. This is our biggest night of the year and you want to risk it on someone who cleans toilets. David felt the words hit him like a slap. He almost turned around right then. Almost walked out the back door and never looked back. But then Mr. Harrison spoke again. I want you to hear him first. Then decide. If you think he can't do it, we'll cut the piece from the program. Fair enough. The orchestra went quiet. Mrs. Peterson nodded slowly. Fine, let's hear him. Mr. Harrison looked toward the wings where David was standing. He motioned for him to come out. David's feet felt like lead weights. He walked onto the stage in his janitor's uniform, his work boots squeaking slightly on the wood floor. 30 pairs of eyes followed him. None of them looked friendly. He sat at the piano. The bench felt different now with all these people watching. His hands trembled as he placed them on the keys. He could hear someone in the orchestra whisper, "This is embarrassing." "Whenever you're ready," Mrs. Peterson said, her tone making it clear she expected this to be a disaster. David closed his eyes. He thought about why he had said yes to this crazy plan. Not for Mr. Harrison, not for the orchestra, not even for himself, really.
He thought about Amy, about the moment years from now when she would ask him about his life, about his dreams.
About whether he had ever taken a chance on something that scared him. He began to play. The opening notes came out soft and clear. The piece started with just the piano, alone like a voice calling out in the darkness. David let each note breathe, gave each phrase space to exist. This was the part where the pianist had to trust that silence could be just as powerful as sound. Then Mrs. Peterson brought in the orchestra. The strings entered first, gentle like morning light, and something magical happened. David and the orchestra found each other. They locked into a conversation, the piano asking questions and the strings answering back and forth, building something beautiful together. The viola player who had called him a janitor stopped frowning. Her bow moved across the strings and David could see her starting to feel the music. The cellist who had laughed earlier leaned into his instrument, his whole body swaying with the melody. They reached the big crescendo, where the piano and orchestra had to surge together like a wave hitting the shore. David's fingers flew across the keys. Every muscle in his back and shoulders engaged. He wasn't just playing notes anymore. He was living inside the music, breathing it, becoming part of it. The first chair violinist, the one who had protested loudest, played his solo line. His eyes met David's across the stage, and David nodded to him, a tiny gesture that said, "I hear you. We're making this together." The violinist's expression changed. The skepticism melted away. They played for 40 minutes straight, working through the entire concerto. When the final chord faded, nobody moved. The silence felt heavy, important. Then the cellist in the back row started clapping. Just him at first. Then the viola player joined. Then the whole orchestra stood up, applauding. Not the polite golf clap of professionals being courteous. Real applause. The kind that meant something. Mrs. Peterson set down her baton and walked over to the piano. She looked at David for a long moment. "How long did you say you've been out of practice?" 20 years, David said quietly. She shook her head in disbelief. "That's not possible. Nobody plays like that after 20 years away." "I never really stopped," David admitted. "Not in here," he tapped his temple. "I played every piece in my head. Every night for 3 years I listened and learned and practiced without touching a piano." Mrs. Peterson laughed, but it was warm this time, not mocking. "Well, Mr. Chen, I guess you're our soloist tomorrow night. Try to get some sleep before then. You'll need it." The orchestra packed up, but several musicians came over to introduce themselves properly. The first chair violinist shook David's hand. "I owe you an apology. That was extraordinary, really." "No apology needed," David said. "I understand. It does sound crazy." After everyone left, David sat alone at the piano for a few minutes. His hands ached. His back hurt. But he felt more alive than he had in years. Mr. Harrison came back onto the stage carrying a garment bag. "Tuxedo," he said, handing it to David. "Should fit. My son's about your size. The gala starts at 7 tomorrow. You should be here by 5 for sound check. Mr. Harrison, I need to tell my family. I can't just show up in a tuxedo and surprise them. So tell them. Call your wife. Be honest." David pulled out his phone. It was almost 3 in the morning. Linda would be asleep. His thumb hovered over her contact. What would he even say? How do you explain something like this over the phone? He pressed call. It rang 4 times. Then her sleepy voice answered, "David? What's wrong? Are you okay?" "I'm fine. I'm at work." "But something happened. Something big. What do you mean?" He could hear her sitting up in bed, suddenly awake. "You're scaring me." "I'm not fired. It's the opposite. It's good. At least I think it's good. Maybe it's crazy." He was talking too fast, his words tumbling over each other. "Linda, I need to tell you something I should have told you years ago." "What is it?" "I've been playing piano. Not really playing, but in my head. Every night here I listen to the orchestra, and I memorize the music and I practice silently, and tonight the director heard me actually play, and now he wants me to perform tomorrow at the gala in front of hundreds of people, and I said yes, and I don't know if I made a huge mistake or if this is the chance I've been waiting for my whole life." Silence on the other end, long enough that David thought the call had dropped. "Linda, you've been doing this for 3 years. And you never told me?" "I was afraid. Afraid you'd think I was being foolish. Afraid I was holding on to something I should have let go of years ago." More silence. Then Linda spoke, and her voice was thick with emotion. "David Chen, you are the most frustrating man I've ever met. And also the bravest. Of course you should play tomorrow. Of course this is your chance. I always knew you were still in there. I was just waiting for you to remember." Relief flooded through David. "You're not angry?" "Angry, I'm proud of you. Terrified for you, but proud." "What time is the gala?" 7 o'clock. "Then Amy and I will be there. Front row if we can manage it." "And David?" "Yes?" "Don't tell Amy it's you performing. Let it be a surprise. She needs to see her father like this. She needs to know that dreams don't die just because life gets hard." They talked for a few more minutes, then said goodnight. David sat in the empty concert hall holding his phone, feeling like maybe the universe was finally pointing in the right direction. Tomorrow night would change everything. For better or worse, nothing would ever be the same again. He just had to survive the next 16 hours without losing his nerve. David barely slept. He lay in bed watching the ceiling, his fingers moving through the concerto over and over in his mind. When dawn finally came, he felt exhausted but strangely calm, like a soldier before battle who has accepted what's coming. He made breakfast for Amy like always, scrambled eggs and toast. She sat at the table doing homework, not knowing that tonight everything would change. "Mom says we're going to a concert tonight," Amy said between bites. "At your work." "Why are we going?" David poured orange juice, keeping his hand steady. "It's a special event. I thought you might enjoy it. They're playing some beautiful music. Will it be boring?" She was 13 now, at that age where nothing parents suggested seemed interesting. "Maybe. Or maybe you'll be surprised." Linda caught his eye across the kitchen. She smiled at him. That secret smile that said she understood what he was feeling even when he couldn't put it into words. The day crawled by. David tried to rest but couldn't. He tried to eat lunch, but his stomach was tied in knots. He put on the borrowed tuxedo at 4 o'clock. It fit almost perfectly. When he looked in the mirror, he barely recognized himself. He looked like someone important, someone who mattered. "You look handsome," Linda said from the doorway. "Like the man I met at the hospital, remember? You came to visit your father and you looked so sad but also so strong. That's how you look right now." "I'm terrified," David admitted. "Good, that means you care." She walked over and adjusted his bow tie. "Amy and I will be there. No matter what happens, we're proud of you." David arrived at the concert hall at 5. The building buzzed with activity. Caterers rushed around setting up tables. Florists arranged massive bouquets. Donors started arriving early, dressed in expensive suits and glittering jewelry. David slipped in through the back entrance, the same door he used every night when he came to clean. Mr. Harrison found him backstage. "How are you feeling?" "Like I might throw up." "That's normal. Come on, let's do the sound check." The orchestra was already in place. They ran through a few sections of the concerto. David's fingers felt stiff at first, but they loosened up as he played. Mrs. Peterson gave him notes, little adjustments in tempo and dynamics. She treated him like any other professional musician. No mention of janitors or unusual circumstances, just the music. By 6:30, the hall was filling up. David watched from backstage as hundreds of people found their seats. He spotted Linda and Amy in the 5th row. Amy looked bored already, checking her phone. She had no idea what was about to happen. The first half of the gala went by in a blur. Other performers played other pieces. David waited backstage, pacing, drinking water, trying to keep his breathing steady. A young woman from the orchestra, the viola player from last night, came to check on him. "Hey," she said, "I just wanted to say what you did last night was incredible. You're going to kill it out there. What if I freeze? What if I forget everything?" "You won't, but even if you do, the orchestra has your back. We'll follow you wherever you go. That's what we do," she smiled. "Besides, you've already done the hardest part. You showed up. Intermission came." David's heart hammered so hard he could feel it in his throat. Mr. Harrison walked onto the stage to introduce the second half of the program. The audience settled down, programs rustling, conversations fading to whispers. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mr. Harrison began, "our final piece tonight is Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. Before we begin, I want to tell you about our soloist." David stood in the wings, his hands ice cold. 3 years ago, a man took a job here at Riverside Concert Hall. He worked night shifts. He cleaned our floors and kept this beautiful building running. His name is David Chen. What none of us knew, what he never told anyone, is that he was once a promising pianist at the Beijing Conservatory. Life took him in a different direction. Family obligations, immigration, the usual sacrifices that good people make. The audience was silent now, confused. Amy sat up straighter in her seat. David could see her from the wings, see the moment recognition started dawning on her face. "Last night I discovered David playing this very concerto, alone, after everyone had gone home, and what I heard was not just competence. It was artistry. It was the real thing." Mr. Harrison paused. "So tonight, David Chen will not be cleaning this concert hall. He will be performing for you. I hope you'll give him the same courtesy and attention you would give any artist who has worked their entire life for a moment like this." Mr. Harrison gestured toward the wings. "David, please join us. This was it." No turning back now. David walked onto the stage. The spotlight hit him like a physical force. The audience was a dark sea of faces. He heard gasps, whispers. Some people were confused. Some were already judging. But then he saw Amy. She was standing up, her hands over her mouth, tears already streaming down her face. Linda had her arm around their daughter, both of them staring at him like they'd never seen him before. David sat at the piano. The Steinway he had cleaned 1,000 times. His hands found the keys. They were warm now, ready. Mrs. Peterson raised her baton. The concert hall held its breath, and then David played. The opening notes floated out into the darkness, soft and questioning. This was the part where the piano spoke alone, vulnerable and exposed. David poured everything into it. Every year of sacrifice, every night of silent practice. Every dream he had buried and every hope he had kept alive. The orchestra joined him, and suddenly he wasn't alone anymore. They surrounded him with sound, lifting him up, carrying him forward. The music swelled and grew. David's entire body became part of the performance. His shoulders, his back, even his breathing matched the rhythm. In the audience, something shifted. The skeptical expressions melted away. People leaned forward in their seats. A music critic in the third row lowered his pen, forgetting to take notes, just listening. A wealthy donor who had been checking her phone put it away and actually watched. David reached the powerful middle section where the piano had to be both delicate and strong, where one wrong move would shatter everything. But his hands knew the way. They had always known. The music poured through him like water that had been dammed up for 20 years, finally breaking free. He glanced up for just a second and saw Amy. She wasn't bored anymore. She was crying, smiling, her whole face lit up with pride and wonder. And David realized this moment wasn't just about him. It was about showing his daughter that people are more than what they appear to be, that fathers who clean floors can also create beauty, that dreams delayed are not dreams denied. The concerto built to its final crescendo. David and the orchestra surged together, the piano and strings and brass all combining into one massive wave of sound that filled every corner of the hall. His fingers flew across the keys faster than thought, playing notes he had practiced 10,000 times in his mind. And then, the final chord. David's hands came down on the keys one last time. The sound rang out, pure and clear, then slowly faded into silence. For 3 long heartbeats, nobody moved. The silence was so complete David could hear his own breathing. He had no idea if he had succeeded or failed. No idea what the audience thought. He just knew he had given everything he had. Then someone stood up. The first chair violinist. He started clapping. Then the whole orchestra rose, applauding. Then the audience exploded. Everyone on their feet, clapping, cheering. It wasn't polite applause. It was thunder. Amy pushed past the people in her row, running toward the stage. Security tried to stop her, but Linda was right behind her, and Mr. Harrison waved them through. Amy climbed onto the stage and threw her arms around David, not caring that hundreds of people were watching. "Dad," she sobbed into his shoulder. "That was you. That was really you." "Yeah," David said, his own tears finally coming. "That was me." Linda joined them, wrapping both of them in her arms. The three of them stood there on stage while the applause continued, while critics stood in ovation while the impossible became real. Later, after the crowd finally dispersed, after dozens of people came up to shake his hand and ask his story, David found himself alone at the piano one more time. Mr. Harrison approached him with a piece of paper. "What's this?" David asked. "A contract. Part-time position. Community outreach coordinator. You'll develop programs for adult students, people who gave up music and want to come back to it. And you'll perform. Not every week, but regularly. It pays better than janitorial work." David stared at the paper, not quite believing it. "You're serious?" "Completely. You showed me something tonight, David. You showed everyone. Talent doesn't have an expiration date. Dreams don't die just because life gets complicated." Mr. Harrison smiled. "Besides, we need someone to mop the floors. Might as well be someone who understands that every job has dignity and every person has worth." That night, David drove home with his family. Amy couldn't stop talking about the performance, about how her friends weren't going to believe her, about how her dad was basically famous now. Linda held his hand in the front seat, not saying much, just being there. When they got home, Amy went straight to the small keyboard in the corner of their living room, the cheap one they had bought at a yard sale years ago. "Dad," she said, "will you teach me?" "Really teach me?" David sat next to his daughter at the keyboard. His hands, rough from years of work but still capable of creating beauty, rested gently on the keys next to hers. "Yeah," he said, "I'd like that." And for the first time in 20 years, David Chen felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be.